going on, John? How you been, man?
Well, it's April, so I'm pretty sure you know how I am right now. A little ragged, eyes are a little heavy. Just got through last night. I think it was probably like 11:30, 12 o'clock. I finally finished up A&M LSU from 2024, which has got all kinds of prospects all over the
I was
place.
gonna say they
So,
have a combined 4,219
yeah,
prospects in
it
this NFL
seems
draft
that way.
alone, with another
It seems that
16,000
way.
to come in the next 3 years. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
it's
it's
remarkable how
crazy.
much talent those two pump out and will continue to pump out.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. I mean, just watching LSU and even LSU defensively, I didn't think was great, but yet they still have got a couple of prospects on the outside. Savion Jones is 285 pounds, long arm, can play inside outside. Braden Swinson, outside linebacker, who I've been watching for a couple days now, and just like every time I watch him, I'm like, man, I think this guy, even though not mentioned a whole lot in the top 50, I think he's going to be in my top 50 for sure.
Wow.
So, just even, and I didn't think LSU's defense was all that good, but yet they still have got a couple of studs, and there are going to be other guys that they have. Greg Penn at linebacker who might be a day three guy. So yeah, it's just, I mean, A&M, I mean, the defensive line for A&M, it's like you got to watch every single guy, every single play because they're all, going to be first or second round. It's pretty crazy what that program has produced. And yet, didn't even get to the SEC championship game. So there's that.
There is that, but no more talk about A&M. No more talk about LSU. It's time to talk about the
No.
Texans drafts.
Yes.
Historically speaking, there have been many good ones. That 2006 draft, think about the guys you got. Mario Williams wound up being a Pro Bowler. You took him first over.
Yep.
You get Owen Daniels mixed in. You get the guy who's
Hmm.
coaching this franchise right
That's right.
now in
That's right.
D'Amico Ryans. I mean, he was the team captain here for the next 6 years or so. So many. David Anderson, Eric Winston, Charles Spencer was on his way, and then
Yeah, that's
awful
right.
injury luck happened. But that was a heck of a draft. That was a rootin'
That
to
was a good one.
NFL draft.
That
2009
was a good one.
later, Brian Cushing, Pro Bowler, captain, leader of your franchise. Connor Barwin got double digit sacks, was a solid player. You get lots. Glover Quinn, maybe the best safety you've ever had in your franchise history. Wanted to kind of keep him around. Things didn't happen that way. You got a lot.
Yeah.
Reed Foster was in that group of rookies, but he wasn't drafted.
Right. Right.
But my point is this: every draft is important, but I want to rewind two springs. I want to go back to 2020.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Think about where we were this time, 2023. Was 3 weeks out. It was looking like, CJ Stroud's name had been mentioned as, hey, he's in the mix there. But I think there were a lot of folks that thought Texans are going to take Will Anderson. A lot of folks. A lot of folks said Stroud as well. But the Texans only had the second and the second overall pick, and then the pick that was farther back in the draft with 12. And you had 2 and 12, and you had to, or we headed to Kansas City, me and about 7 or 8 others from the social, digital, video team. We're here with the Texans. Media relations, Everett Gearlings was there. And we get to Kansas City, and it's looking more and more like it's probably going to be Will Anderson. Be prepared for
Yep.
Will Anderson. We started hearing some things. And basically, this is like a little semi behind the curtains look back at what went down. I'll tell my story. You'll tell your story. But we got there. It was fun. Had a nice barbecue dinner the night before. And then we get there in the afternoon. We set up shop a few hours before the draft starts. We're in the media center. And I'm checking Twitter pretty regularly there. And it's up on my laptop. And all the people that I'm working with that were there, I'm in my 40s. All the people there were in their 20s, their mid 20s, right out of college. Lost a light there. And I see some stuff popping up from folks who follow the sports books and the betting lines and everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
And about an hour out, all the stuff about Will Anderson, they didn't say too much, but about an hour out, it was very clear like CJ Stroud is the odds on favorite to be the second overall pick to the tune of about like minus 100, which is like that's automatic. If
Yep.
So I was like, whoa. And I didn't say anything because whatever, stuff's going on. And then it felt like about 20 minutes later, those odds jumped to something like minus 700. And that made me raise my eyes a lot. And then about 10 minutes after that, it moved into the thousands. And I said,
Yeah.
Hey guys, because we'd been prepared to, we'd been told, hey, get prepared for Will Anderson.
Right. Right.
Be prepared because you're going to interview him. He's going to come over. Get set for Will Anderson.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that, and I say to our crew, I was like, guys, Las Vegas is saying with certainty that we're going to take CJ Stroud. He's a minus whatever, the odds are at minus whatever for this. And this is what happened. Like, all these young people just look up and they just go back to work. So, like, nice. It's CJ Stroud. And they're like, okay, cool. And they're getting ready for Will Anderson. Draft happens. CJ Stroud gets picked. So that's exciting. So we're getting ready. So, hey, plans change. Instead of getting ready for Will Anderson, we got ready for CJ Stroud. It wasn't a huge detour. I mean, he's somebody we knew about. We were ready to talk about him. We were ready to talk about Bryce Young in case something weird happened and Carolina didn't. Bryce Young. We were definitely ready to talk about Will Anderson and talk to Will Anderson because lots of connections. Phenomenal player, was the best defensive player in the draft. There was a good chance he was coming here no matter what. So as we're gathering our things, putting on my suit jacket because I was suit and tie and ready to rock.
Yep.
Gonna do my interview on a balcony with CJ Stroud after he did all the stuff and came over. My phone starts erupting, and I didn't really think much. It's just like, yeah, you take the second overall pick, people are going to start saying things. And then one of my friends on my high school thread, who's a real Weisenheimer who likes to take shots, said, love this, what the Texans are doing, love the wheeling and dealing. And I was like, what's he talking about? There's no wheeling and dealing. And then I saw it, John, and the Texans took Will Anderson too. And I was just like, oh my goodness. And so they said, get ready, you're going to interview him at the same time. And there's a picture of me in between them, and we did the interview. And I mean, that's a franchise changing moment, just taking Stroud.
Yep.
And then I thought Daniel Jeremiah said it really well. He said, you've just erected or just drafted two pillars of an organization for the next decade or so. And I mean, it was bananas, just bananas. And the excitement, because there was already excitement about D'Amico Ryans getting hired. And this just pushed it into overdrive. Since that moment that the Texans took Stroud and then moved up to take Anderson, this place has been bananas. Now, that's my story. You were here for the draft party, and that was a whole beast into itself.
Well, I think one of the things you and I have started doing this. In fact, we did it a couple weeks ago. We did our mock draft in the lab, and so we go through all the different. We use PFN. You can use PFF. There are probably a few others, but those are the two that I think most people use. Now, using those mock drafts, you go with essentially those rankings and how players are ranked via PFN and PFF, and so you kind of go through there. But I was of a mindset going into that draft that it was a 4-player elite draft. Mm-hmm. It was Bryce and CJ, it was Will, and it was Jalen Carter. Now, Jalen had a few extra nuggets thrown into the bouillabaisse due to some issues off the field. There was some thought about his coachability, all that. So all these things kind of rise. He had to leave the combine because he had been speed racing and he was arrested. So anyways,
he would have been a major upset, like major.
Yeah, it would have.
Texans had taken him, and I mean, like what's her face? Who beat Georgetown and who was Raleigh Massimino? Was it Villanova?
Oh, Villanova. Yeah, Villanova.
Like Villanova.
Yeah, you got it.
Or Georgetown.
Yeah. So I didn't think it was going to happen, but I remember I would play around with those mock draft simulators, and I would try and figure out what does it take to get two of them, because we were sitting at 2 and 12 in that draft. Thank you, Cleveland Browns. And so trying to figure out, okay, what if 12 could 12 turn into 4? Could 12 turn into 3? How would it come to be? And so I played around with it a number of times, and you know me, I don't like giving up draft picks because I like hearing the Houston Texans have selected such and such. But I looked at it and thought, boy, I could live with that if we got two of these guys. Not obviously two quarterbacks, but Bryce and Will, CJ and Will. okay, but I don't know how, what's the appetite for doing that? So then you fast forward to the draft. And so we're out at the draft party. It was out at Miller Outdoor Theater, and we're on an adjacent stage off to the side. And so we had with DP, we had an hour show before that.
Mm-hmm.
And on that hour show, we had different guests, and the very last guest that we had was former Texans president Greg Grissom, and Greg typically was in the know on things, and so he asked me, "What do you think?" And I literally went to him, "I think it's Stroud or Anderson, like this."
Yeah.
And so with my right hand, that was Anderson, and he leaned towards Anderson. He goes, "It's him," or something of that. I think
Yeah,
it's him. I'm
that's
pretty
what
sure
we're
it's him.
preparing
Yeah.
for. That's what we've been told. Yeah.
So, but I, like you, I'm seeing and I'm having people tell me about the Vegas odds, and I'm like, man, that's usually Vegas. Vegas knows something.
Vegas knows.
Like, this is strange. And I remember Landry Locker coming up to me saying, bro, Vegas has got Stroud at like minus 15,000 or something like that. I'm like, that's a lock.
It rose
That's
precipitously.
basically,
It rose precipitously from being
and it literally was from
an
like
absolute to a lock, like lock.
right. And it was like from 6:30 to about 7 o'clock where that happened.
Yeah.
But using Daniel Jeremiah too, one of the things that Jeremiah had put in his final mock draft was he had the Texans taking Will Anderson at 2, and then at number 3 taking C.J. Stroud. Then I remember thinking, you can't take them in that order. If you're going to do that, you have to take Stroud first, because if you leave Stroud on the board, you're going to have all these bidders at number 3 with Arizona.
Yeah, and they can
If you
hold
take Stroud first, then some of those teams drop off, and now you don't pay as much to the Cardinals in a trade for Will Anderson. But I thought it was interesting that Daniel Jeremiah had that, and I wondered where that came from. But he had the move up. He's had the wrong order, but I felt like you had to get Stroud. So I remember when I heard that the odds were going up, I thought back to Jeremiah's mock draft, and I thought, man, okay, is there a way they can get both? Well, after they got CJ, I was so excited because I really liked CJ. I had told people throughout the process, like, I don't know how many games, throws, whatever I'd seen of CJ Stroud. I'm like, y'all got so locked in on Bryce, you forgot there's a dude playing quarter. There's a dude. Now, I had Bryce 1 and CJ 2, but they were very, very close. And so I was like, look, if Carolina takes CJ or takes Bryce, we'll take CJ, and vice versa. I didn't really mind either one, because I think both of them, in my mind, I felt like we're going to end up being really, really good NFL quarterbacks. So when Bryce goes off the board, okay, the odds have gone up. Like, I thought back to Jeremiah's mock draft. I thought, okay, but we're so happy about the CJ thing. And then all of a sudden we're talking about CJ, and Robert Hensley, who is our producer on the our Texans broadcast, when he has something to say during the draft, he kind of puts his finger up and he kind of tries to get our attention. This time he like shot his finger up, and it was like, hey, I need to talk. And we're like, okay. And that's when it hit me that, oh man, maybe Jeremiah was right. And then I could hear the words coming out of Robert's mouth and the way he's talking. And I'm like, this is us. We've made a move up. We're going to get Will Anderson.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like all of a sudden we just had this joy. And if you go look at my Twitter feed at Jay Harris Football, my picture is when the trade was announced, and Andre Ware and I are like, giving each other high fives because we end up getting Will Anderson.
Awesome.
And it was just getting CJ Stroud and Will Anderson. It was such a magnificent moment. But Drew, I think that draft, it goes down. Like I asked Mark this the other day. I did like a March Madness bracket, and I did like a Final Four of the draft and of drafts. And I had the 2023 as the number 1 seed, 2006 is number 2.
Yeah.
And 2023 ended up winning. I think that's how it went. Anyways, the thing about 2023 is you follow up with going and getting Juice, getting Tank. Obviously Nick is trading up and trading down and moving around. But then on day 3, Henry To'oTo'o, then you end up getting Jarrett Patterson.
Yeah.
You ended up with so many guys that were going to step right in and make plays for you right away. I mean, CJ, Will, Tank, Juice, Jarrett. Those guys all started as rookies. Henry had a couple starts as a rookie, but then in year two, he ended up being one of your best defensive players all year long.
Mm-hmm.
So that draft, as long as guys stay healthy, and obviously health is a major concern because what Tank has gone through, and I hate that for Tank. But those guys, my gosh, that's where this whole thing starts. I mean,
you got a
it's
Pro
just
Bowl
amazing.
quarterback. You got the Rookie of the Year on the defensive side of the ball and the offensive side of the ball, along with those guys you mentioned. I mean, it's going to take a lot for that draft to get topped.
Yep.
At least in terms of the Texans.
And I would love it if 2025 topped it. I would love it.
Sure,
but
sure.
I think what separates that draft and all the other drafts is the fact that the Texans have very rarely drafted a quarterback. I mean, and how many drafts we had? 22 drafts, 23 drafts, whatever it is. Drafted a quarterback, obviously David Carr. There have been other times where
Dave Ragone. Yeah, but that's
Dave Ragone, Deshaun Watson. I mean, Tom Savage. I mean, Alex Brink. There just have not been very many.
It's Van Pelt.
And I think Van Pelt was one.
Yeah.
I think very late.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there have been some guys along the way, but as far as first or second round quarterbacks, it's been David Carr, Deshaun Watson, CJ Stroud.
Yeah.
And we thought we had something with Deshaun, and obviously that went sideways. And we hope we have something with CJ, but there have been so few times that you end up with a quarterback in the draft. But this one, you got the quarterback and the alpha piece of your defense and a game-breaking wide receiver and a special teams linebacker who grew into one of your top starters the second year of his professional career. So that draft is just incredible. But just
coming from where
how it went down.
Three awful losing seasons, and then you pull that off. And then let's add in a PS. And for kids that don't realize, like when you write a letter, you say, "Dear so-and-so." You have your bulk of your letter. You say sincerely or yours truly or love or until next time, Drew or John. And then, I wanted to add one more thing. Postscript. PS.
Yeah, PS.
The Texans, there was some debate over, do we send our pick or do we send Cleveland's pick in the first round? Because the Texans had two first rounders in 2024. And so, hey, are we sending them which one? And the Texans sent them their own.
That's right, their own pick.
Because, and I was told, because they thought we're going to be better than the Browns in 23.
Right.
And Deshaun Watson had come back in 22, and it looked like, okay, he didn't have the best year in 22, but hey, things are going to take off, and he'll get back in the groove. He'll be back in that Pro Bowl form that he was before all this stuff. That did not happen. So the Texans wound up having the good season. The Browns had a really good season, and then you beat the Browns in the playoffs. So your draft pick is further down the chain and not as good as the Browns pick. So the Texans wound up dealing that away. But it was all, I remember in the aftermath of that, there's so much going on that weekend that the talk of whose pick they got, I heard the Texans think we're going to be better than the Browns. And I thought that was kind of fun. Called their shot.
Yeah.
Boom.
Yeah. And it was interesting because so many people were like, oh my God, Arizona just got the top two picks in the 2024 draft.
No, they did not.
The top two picks. No, they were up there, I think 3. And then the other one ended up being like 26.
But the early mock drafts until about October, all the mock drafts had the Cardinals picking 1 and the Texans picking 2 and all the draft glitterati like
That's true. They did. That was the reaction. That was the reaction to the trade.
Dummy.
And I just kept telling people with that trade, I was like, come on, man. Like you know me, I try to think a year ahead as much as I can. I try to get ahead of it. And so I had already done a little bit of work on 2024. And what I realized was that unless some guys came out, which I wasn't sure if they were going to, you're probably not going to find your defensive chess piece.
Mm-hmm.
And lo and behold, in 2024, the very first defensive player taken in the draft was pick 15, Leatu Latu.
Great
all
player.
the way down to 15. There was not a defensive game changer. So moving up to get one of the elite players, one of the elite locker room guys, one of the elite leaders, and one of the elite edge players in the draft that you knew you weren't going to get in 2024, I thought was absolutely genius. Now, it might have just been that they were just sold on Will Anderson, but those ramifications also after the fact, I think, played in to why it was such a good move to go get Will at that point.
Awesome. All right. So sometimes here on In the Lab, presented by Xfinity, we got to go down memory lane. And that's what we did today. John, it's always fun to do that with you. We'll be back again next week. We've got another mock draft simulation to come. Because, hey, we're shooting this on a Wednesday, and a week from tomorrow, we're what? Or excuse me, 3 weeks from tomorrow, we got the draft starting. So, boom.
3 weeks from Thursday, baby. Here we go.
All right. Till then, so long. See ya.